Hello, thank you for joining us. This is Platform. I'm Ruth Aguwala. Reforms are crucial for the development of any nation, either in fiscal policy, monetary systems, or any critical sector. The main objective of reforms is to overhaul a system and re-establish a system that works even better. But more importantly, having citizens buy into ongoing reforms becomes a collective approach with positivity as the set goal. This administration started on a positive, reformative drive on assuming office in May 2023. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu introduced a series of bold economic reforms aimed at stabilizing and revitalizing Nigeria's economy. Now, these reforms have drawn both accolades and criticisms due to their wide-ranging impact on citizens and the broader economy. Now, some of the key reforms introduced include the fuel subsidy removal, exchange rate unification, the tax reforms, which have been made to broaden the tax base and enhance government revenue, the digital economy drive. We're seeing infrastructural investment, student loan scheme, and the consumer credit scheme. But what are the gains, impediments, and projections in the nation's path towards achieving a $1 trillion economy by 2030? On Platform, we'll put a spotlight on economic reforms on the President Tinubu's administration. Our guest is Dr. Niyi Akinshiju. He's a financial and investment analyst and also chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, and just before we bring in our panelists, of course, you know the tradition. We want you to know more of our guest. We just have a bit of his profile. He's a veteran journalist, a writer with inclination for investment and sundry issues. He holds radical views on political matters. He is the chairman of policy think tank, Independent Media and Policy Initiative, and has doctorate degree in development communication. Dr. Akinshiju is a special advisor to APC National Chairman on strategy and planning. Well done.
Thank you so much.
All right. I was wondering how I got that.
I was wondering.
Musa Abubakar, business correspondent, is on the panel today. Thank you, Musa, for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So, Dr. Akinshiju, you've been in the game for a while, even from the past administration till now. And 2 years ago, I'm sure you recall vividly, the first reform that welcomed Nigerians was the removal of fuel subsidy, to cut costs in governance and all of that. And now going by what has played out, the indices and the impact or the rippling effect, what would you say, if you want to give an assessment?
Well, I think I can borrow the basis of assessment from the recently concluded or conducted business expectation survey by the Central Bank of Nigeria. This is a survey the Central Bank of Nigeria conducts every month, engaging captains of industries in critical sectors of the economy, in agriculture, services, industry, etc. The survey measures the confidence level of captains of industry in the economy. And why that is important is that the private sector is supposed to drive the economy. It is a confidence expressed in that economy that, of course, encourages, incentivizes the tendency or the inclination of the captains to either invest, withhold investments, or to. So the higher the confidence level, the higher the likelihood of increased investment. And we know that investment is a major driver of multiple factors in the economy, either at the level of employment, at the level of expansion of plants, and of course, increased investment also lead to creation of subsidiaries. So when there's higher confidence level expressed by those who make decisions on investment, it is most likely that the environment, the business environment, will be better enhanced. So the April Business Expectation Survey shows that there is an increased positive outlook, by these business owners, the executives. April shows 22.3% confidence level, and the CEOs have also expressed the fact that the confidence level is likely to continue on an increased trajectory to up to 48% in October this year. So what that tells you is a willingness to engage with the economy by these businesses. So the major driver of this expectation, the major drivers of this confidence level would of course be the policies that have been deployed, the impact of the policies, and it will also reflect the fact that you are seeing positive results, on the business activities of these companies. Most quoted companies on the Nigerian Stock Exchange that declared losses based on their forex losses in 2024 are back to profit making. All, not even most, all. NTA declared a loss in 2024. Dangote in 2024, Unilever in 2024, Boa Group in 2024, and you can go on, including CBN itself, But in first quarter 2025, we are seeing a resurrection of sorts in that segment. All have declared profits after tax, positive profit after tax, and of course the CBN itself declared a profit, after a loss of 1 trillion in 2024, declared a profit of 30 billion, in this first quarter. It's a changing economic model that we have experienced since 2023, May, when this government assumed office. There were expectations, But of course, what the government decided to do, what the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu decided to do, was to apply the basic tenet of economy. The basic tenet of economy is efficient application of resources. So much that at the entering point of efficiency in application of resources, the exit point is efficiency gain. So it's a positive. So you apply efficiency, all factors of production are directed, applied efficiently. When you properly manage that template, at the end of it, you do not just get gains, but you also get gains that are attached to the efficiency, to the application of efficiency.
Go ahead. Well, I see you nodding to some of the issues
because you made mention of the fact that those, subsidies that are supposed to go to those people is not actually getting to those people. Is actually there are some few individuals that are taking advantage of it. But today we get to see a whole different picture, because the cost of energy has gone up and is actually affecting inflation today. Price stability has been an issue. And it's not just about fiscal authority, it's just addressing the issues of insecurity in some farming communities to boost local capacity, or as much as, farm produce production. But it's also an issue of the issue of energy cost. It seems to affect virtually almost everything.
You noted issues of security around farm gates and all that. Yeah. If we start analyzing that, it's a V shape. you keep going into other segments. So thanks for limiting to energy. What is obvious is that, just as I noted, when there is price suppression, subsidy is to suppress price. Open market price is to say that if this item costs 1,000, the federal government would pay 600, and then, of course, it means that the beneficiary, the consumer, will pay 400. But at what cost, is that subsidy being applied? That's the question. So when the government now says, okay, rather than suppress this price by this amount, 600, can we take this 600 and apply to critical functions of state that will benefit all? Roads. It got to a point in time we could not realize enough earnings to invest in infrastructure. So much that in a budget circle, even out of the normal 30% that is committed to infrastructure, hardly was government able to realize 10% of real revenue to channel into infrastructure. And at the end of the day, you now have a multiplier where people, entrepreneurs, farmers, those in the urban centers, other manufacturers and all that, are now operating a deficit-based system because of inefficiency in infrastructural facilities. Farmers would farm. Let's discount security now. Farmers will produce in their farm. To take the product from farm to even the artery, the road, the next road arteries, which is usually controlled, constructed by the local government, becomes difficult. From that point to the city is also a major challenge. By the time these products get to where it's usually consumed, the urban centers, we've lost more than 70%. 70% of it. So it has become a major concern. So the immediate resolution of that will be, can we have more fund directed at providing roads? So much that because of that application of efficiencies and application of efficiency, so that we can move these goods that have been produced, 1,000 units of mangoes, for instance, would get to the urban center within the shortest possible time, and perhaps the losses may be under 5%. Now compare that to 70%. The farmer is happier when he's able to get to the market with the bulk of his product, and he earns more. So even whereas the products, or rather the cost of living, is higher now, the farmer is able to earn more, to fund the increased cost of living. The latest we've had that states had acquired an aggregate of 5 point something trillion loans, debt, and that over the last 2 years they had paid 1.8 trillion. Now, why? How? What happened? Simply because the subsidy that had been removed has now been saved. It has increased the volume of revenue available for sharing amongst the three tiers of government. So any responsible state government now has more money, of course, to start, defraying the debts it had secured. Even at the level of the federal government, we also have the federal government, both historical and current debt, going up to $113 billion. And I'm talking about both domestic and the foreign debt. $113 billion. The last count of the recent figure that we have is that it has been reduced to $94 billion. That has implication. One, the higher your debt, the higher the cost of servicing your debt. And it is also opportunity cost. So when you are servicing debt, the real cost of the servicing of the debt is actually the life, the infrastructure that you are not able to provide. Those are the real costs. Okay. So the quicker you can reduce your debt profile will also reflect in your debt servicing. It will mean that you would have saved more money to provide for the people.
Talking about provision, of course, the administration recognized some of the effect, of the reforms and also the positive sides, like you have broken down for us. But in the aspect of interventions, following these reforms, We saw in the energy aspect that Musa brought up, we saw the whole move to look at alternative means for energy. Now, how would you, assess that aspect? Because we saw the push really last year, for people to move to the other aspect. Yes, that's a CNG.
It takes an innovative leadership to even think out of the box, to have that kind of alternative. Because it's a resources that had always been there. It should not just be in 2025 or 2024 that we should be thinking of compressed natural gas, for usage in our transportation mode. Gas has always been associated with crude oil in Nigeria. So why did we have to wait?
What has not been really harnessed?
That's the problem, and it is because of this model that we have been, operating all this while. It brings complacency when you have when you are earning so much for crude oil. You do not think of alternatives. You do not think of moving forward to exploit other related, resources in the environment. And so we have been living from hand to mouth in the real sense of it. We earn so much money when there is oil boom. When the global market crashes, we go into another circle of bust. We start talking about, don't forget what you call austerity measure, had been on, since the 70s to 80s. So it's a circle. So now, if we are able to diversify our economy, CNG usage is part of diversification of economy, and it is also part of addition to our energy mix. Yeah. So it's serving two purposes. Diversify economy, gas usage. Gas is the base resource for urea, a base element or factor for fertilizer. Now, Nigeria is becoming a net exporter of urea to West African countries. It's not as if that had not been there, but because there is a new reality of using resources in the most efficient manner, and now we are tapping into what we have. Now, using CNG has also been established long time ago that the use of CNG per liter, is far cheaper, far efficient than using PMS. So why would we just be so obdurate, in our concern over PMS when we have this alternative? And of course, people are saying, it's not available. And I say, no, even if you have ₦1 trillion and you want to build a 10-story building, you cannot wave it into existence. It must go through certain processes. So if CNG is beautiful, but there's no way we can possibly have 1 million, stations, within a year. It has to go through processes. It's about piping, and you have to pipe in the most safe manner, under regulatory conditions and all that. And yes, I also see that it's becoming popular. I was in Lagos recently. I saw vehicles where CNGs are sold, are dispensed. I saw vehicles on queue, receiving it. So I think over time, this will become popular. Access to it has become democratized, so more people would use it, because truly there are evidence to show that it's cheaper to use than PMS. And not just that it's cheaper to use than PMS, it is also safer. Though some people had expressed concern over safety, but research has shown that it is safer to use. So for where I'm concerned, I think it's a new world breaking for Nigeria. It's a new world of possibility. The important thing is for us to start opening up our minds, to how,
embrace,
yes, how do we adapt? Yeah. How do we adjust? So for me, I grew up loving socialism. Socialism. I grew up advocating for Marxism. I was, at a time in my growing up days, a Marxist. Not just a Marxist, leader of a Marxist group. And in school, in the university, I was president of the Students' Union based on my passion for Marxism, for socialism, and all that, you know. So, but it got to a stage. We realized that even China, that were supposed to be our model back in those days, are adopting free market economy.
So
even
you have
Russia,
changed your Marxism ideology.
I have to start adapting.
Okay, we've seen transition from fossil fuel to compressed natural gas, and which is actually slow. Is there any kind of way that we can actually accelerate the process? Because it seems to be very slow. Because when you look at it, it somehow cushions the effect of the cost of energy.
Yeah, it would have. It would have. I think the drawdown there, for me, it's communication. I think the managers of that policy should do a lot of enlightenment, you know, galvanize public interest. And I think the more public interest is galvanized, the more investors will see opportunities. So if you see people, if I'm an investor, if I see people talking more about CNG and all that, it won't just be the government, that's the government alone that is driving the realization. You will now see more investors coming into play. Yeah. And when we are able to achieve that, of course, and of course, again, I hope that the licensing process is also enabled.
And also the cost. Yeah. The cost has always been a concern to a lot of people. It costs a lot to actually convert. Initial cost. Yes,
and I think government is actually providing subsidy to assuage the initial cost. That's what the managers are saying. That I think they will provide 1 point something million subsidy for the first 1,000 or so users, you know, that come forward for conversion. And a number of people, a number of operators too, are also being engaged by government, trained, and some of the assets and equipment that they will be need are also provided at subsidized rates. That is where subsidy is appropriate in production.
Based on my interaction, you know, on the CNG issue, that is where the challenge is. The tools needed, you know, for this conversion, the conversion tools, when you're importing it, that's where the cost of this production, you know, lies. Which brings me to another critical reform, the exchange rate unification. By the present administration, we saw that last year having its own effect down, you know, as a way of, you know, merging multiple exchange rates into single market-driven rate. If you want to look at the exchange rate and the foreign direct investments we're seeing and we're trying to create that balance, is it been achieved so far? I'm not saying we're there yet, but looking at the trajectory.
Yeah, it's been achieved.
Okay.
Yeah. One, again, we go back to price suppression. Rates is actually the cost of purchase of a currency, you know. So if we say a dollar sells for 1,620 today at the BDC, it means that the price of buying a dollar is 1,000. The reality is that by 2023 May, June, the price of a dollar was, I think, 462 or 463 thereabouts. It does translate to mean that the government was suppressing price, subsidizing that rate by more than 1,000 naira. And just like the example I made in a subsidy, it means that money that should have been used for some other more critical purposes, we were actually using to suppress rates, to suppress price of currency. And the unfortunate thing in pricing in a foreign exchange is that not up to 50% of Nigerians, not up to 60% of Nigerians have access to foreign exchange. They don't even have need for it, except indirectly through manufacturers and all that. You get it? So, and it also turned out that about 40% of foreign exchange usage, was for what you call invisibles. Going to schools, funding for schools, funding for health, and such others. So what you now realize is that those using Forex in Nigeria at that suppressed rate are actually privileged people. There are Nigerians that have never stepped out of Nigeria, so they don't have any need for invisibles. So where you now have the larger percentage of people using foreign exchange at a privileged rate, it does mean there's a distortion in the system. So the only way to correct it is let it be open. As you float it, you also manage the float. What we have now is managed float. The CBN determines, okay, let's float. If there's a critical or a near crisis situation, it intervenes. So I think to a large extent that had also discouraged the exploitation of Forex by people that are privileged. Now, because of that policy, transaction rate had gone up. The transaction rate had gone up and had also now discouraged people, or rather turned some people into using resources back home now. I know of a particular school that people fund their children to. In dollar, in pounds, in the UK, in the US. Those schools are establishing now, are coming into Nigeria to establish because of the rates, of funding in terms of Forex. You can now get Forex anywhere, anytime, but the rate is discouraging. That is one. Then two, you have also seen a reduction in the tendency for round tripping. Before, if you are privileged, all you need to do is to try and get a handshake with the CBN governor. If you get a handshake with the big CBN governor and you are lucky to secure $1 million, at 460 naira per dollar, you go to the black market, you sell at 750. You have made a kill of 350 or 300 naira. And you now multiply that by 1 million, that's 300 million naira. You have not applied any production resources, So these had also now, of course, there's a bridging in the gap of the difference between the official rates and the BDC rate.
But do you think we will achieve that point of convergence?
I think it's getting nearer. At the point in time, you are a market, follower. At the point in time, we actually had rates higher in the official market than the BDC. But now, even as of today, the difference is not up to 40%, 40 naira.
Well, Dr. Kinshojo, people are concerned about the long-term and the short-term impact.
It's a short-term impact that we should be concerned with, because long-term, eventually, things will be masticated. It's a short-term. It's like, it's near what I call a culture shock. We are coming from a culture of, well, this thing is provided and we are just managing. If you know the right person, you get it and you leave. And if your brother knows somebody, you get it and you leave. But it's restrictive, it's limited, the access is limited. And thus it also impacts development. Development is pivoted on access by all to resources of states. So when you are able, and that is that's what an open market, template does. You are able to approach the market. You can enter, free entry, free exit. You can access, and if you want,
willing buyer, willing seller.
Thank you. So at that level, everybody can take economic decisions, and you have more economic players, in the space. So for me, the short term is critical because it's strange to us. We are seeing what the real value of our currency is.
Yeah. But
that is the difference.
It's also tied to our economy. How much economic activities we do is tied to the naira.
Because even by the survey by Manufacturer Association of Nigeria in 2024 and the first quarter 2025, they are now talking about more companies in Nigeria engaging in backward integration. Because the bulk, about 40% of our foreign exchange usage is by the manufacturing sector.
Okay,
And
Dr. Akinshiju, I have to interject there. We're due for a break.
All right.
We'll pick up with the conversation. Let's take a break. Thank you for staying tuned. The conversation is economic reforms under the Tinubu's administration. Dr. Akinshiju, we've looked at the unification of the exchange rate, but another issue that has been in the lips of so many Nigerians is the tax reforms. Of course, you know the whole essence is to modernize the tax system and enhance efficiency. But we're seeing the debates play out here and there. Do people really understand the impact when we're talking income tax exemptions, the VAT and all of that? Do people really understand what it entails and how it will impact their lives?
Again, the concern would be enlightenment. We need to continuously enlighten the space on how profound this coming tax bill or the tax act as it may be. I believe the president.
I think they've gone through
the president
both houses.
Yes, it's been passed. Yeah.
So
just the president needs to assent
to it.
So there's still a bill.
Yeah,
It's still a bill.
It's still a bill.
Yeah, so,
Until assented to.
but I believe the president will quickly, assent to it because of what I describe as profound, provisions in the law. One, the Nigerian person is always concerned about his take home, and we are saying for the first time we are going to have a law that says don't bother about your take home, especially for you from 0 to 1 million naira per annum, take your money away. For those even from 1 million to 10 million or thereabout, your tax can also be redeemed. What we used to have when we were growing, you pay your tax, you pay tax, and then you have deductions, clear taxable deductions and taxable returns on responsibilities. So if you have a home, you have a wife, you have 2 children, 3 children, you have a dependent, 1 or 2 dependents, we are supposed to have tax deductions or that tax rebate on those ones. So this tax bill is helping us structure what a real tax ecosystem should be. And it's not just about income tax alone. The same thing with VAT. There are items now that are not VATable. It used to be in it used to be, what do I call it, not too serious format. But now in this bill, in this act, or in this law, it's still law, in this law, food items, health items, certain percentage of school earnings or cost, would be exempted from tax. Then we have a love for properties.
I was going through it.
We have a love for properties. The average Nigerian person wants to either inherit property, build property, and all that. Now, there's also an exemption to a certain percentage, on property tax.
That's
0.5 or something, it has. Then
for the VAT.
For the VAT, it's there are general exemptions on VATs now, and of course, the originating bill, by the committee was to say VAT would increase by graduation from 7.5% to 10%, 11%, blah, blah, to 15% at the peak. But the National Assembly in its freedom saying, no, we are going to sustain at 7.5%. It's okay. The important thing is to take off, I have been expecting the tax law, as a major intervention into what we are doing, into what government is doing at this time, because it will add to the ease of living, ease of doing business enablement, because it can cover virtually all aspects of the economy.
Now what's your assessment on small businesses, and how do you see this somehow reshaping our fiscal policy?
Small businesses are exempted. If from 0 to 100 million, it used to be 50 million. Sorry,
okay.
It used to be 0 to 25 million.
It's 50
turnover.
million.
Then we'll come to that. It used to be 0 to 25 million. They have now extended it to 50 million. Use exemption on company income tax. So when you have that, it does mean that when you have any form of earnings within that range, you are able to reinvest again. And we all agree that small businesses are the foundation of the Nigerian economy. Yeah. So if you are able to allow or enable the small businesses to reinvest, it means they are expanding. When the business expands, the immediate implication is employment, because expansion translates to employing at least one other person into your concern, your going concern. Then from 50 million to 100 million, there is a reduction too. Instead of the standing tax, company income tax, is 30% of your earnings, what you call profit before tax. So when tax is applied, after you have done all the deductions and all that, when tax is applied, it's 30%. But on 150 to, I think it's even higher than 100 million, it has been reduced to about 15%, So, and again, all the levies that comes into taxation, into the taxation template, would also be reduced over time. Now, if you look at the levies, development levies, TET fund, NITDA, a number of them, that adds up to 36%. So in actual fact, when a concern pays tax in Nigeria, you are paying an aggregate of 36%. But the tax law is saying from going forward, those taxes will now be faded out, so much that it won't even stop at 30%. I think the target is 25%. So that's business enablement.
Now how do you factor this tax policy? Then you talk about the current GDP growth. How do you factor all this thing into achieving the $1 trillion economy?
So let's say what exactly is GDP? It's the value of production, cost value of goods and services within the environment. What drives value is purchases, because the more the economic agents are enabled to buy more, either of goods and services, the economic tendency is for producers of goods and services to produce more. So now you have a tax system that is encouraging people to have more. And to have more would mean to purchase more. So by purchasing more, you also now incentivize the producers of goods and services within the economy to produce more. So when you produce, and I'm taking that is just one segment, of the larger economy that we are talking about. But we are talking about what this new taxation template will do to drive the 1 trillion economy. Yeah. So for me, is to say that you have more SMEs, you have more people engaging in businesses, you have more people purchasing more because of increased purchasing power. Now, when you have increased purchasing power, it also translates to mean that the buyer, the consumer, is at will now to also expend on what you call discretionary spending. So it's not just going to be about basic consumption, but it's also going to be about spending that sometimes you may not even need. And the economy has shown that, yes, it may have issues around efficiency, but again, when you also have people expending money on luxury, it also helps the economy. This chair, as it is luxury, because it's serving a purpose that is more than sitting on, and because you have people purchasing more of that, it also opens up that aspect, that segment of the economy. So the long and short of it is that we have a tax system now that is not just about taking money from people, but it's about actually incentivizing people, to have more and to go and buy more.
But Dr. Akinshiju, is one thing to have this law, come to place, but is another thing to ensure the effective implementation of it. If we're talking the aspect of transparency, accountability, and seeing the impact of what we want to get out of these revenues for the people.
Thank you for that question. But again, there's also, I love this tax bill. From the concept, when they've started discussion around it, I took my time to read and all that, and I feel that yes, nothing is perfect, but all the outliers issues have been taken care of. And that is why they have this one order that talks about the Federal Revenue Services. It's impressive because now you have one body responsible for collecting and aggregating taxes. Unlike when you have the Joint Tax Board, when you have 36 plus 1, agencies. So, of course, when you have 36 plus 1 agencies collecting, you have 36 plus 1 attitude, in that space.
The attitude.
But
Okay.
now you have one that will manage the collection and that is responsible to the 36 plus 1 and responsible to the president. So there's control, there's regulation.
Okay, short-term pain for long-term gain. That's what the policy entails.
Yeah.
But going with what we have today, I mean the indicators, would you say that this reform's actually worth it?
Inflation rate,
Yes.
as it is declining marginally, peripherally, but where have we seen inflation rates decline like a jump?
But the target of 2025 budget is to achieve a 15%.
Yeah, 15%.
Inflation rate.
Well, we have seen the data for the fourth year, for the fourth month, so we still have 8 months to go. I believe that by the time you have all these other policies come into play, it will impact. But I first would like us to achieve the CBN target of 21%, for 2025. And of course, I believe that the 15% is also achievable. It may not be in exact, but there's a likelihood that we run into that bracket, the 15 to
Doctor,
20.
we are talking
20%.
about food importation, food produce from outside the country to somehow address issue of price stability. And that leaves our farmers in the cold.
No, it's an intervention. It's an intervention that has multiple implications. When you say something is an intervention, it's not supposed to be permanent.
Okay.
It's the idea, the policy
for a
itself.
certain period.
Yeah, the policy itself says 6 months. And I'm very sure whatever we are seeing now are just the overflow of that 6 months. Don't also forget that it didn't start to time. In that it took up to 4 to 6 months itself for it to commence, and as it is going on, there are different sorts of engagements. Don't forget that the Bank of Agriculture has been capitalized now to up to 1.5 trillion from less than 600 billion. So when you see such gesture, you know what the government is trying to achieve. So it means that we'll have a more active, active Bank of Agriculture. And it is not the CBN responsibility to be doing all that, with the ACOS Borrowers Program and all that. It's the responsibility of an entity like the Bank of Agriculture. Now we're also talking about Forest Guard. It talks to the fact that the chief executive officer of this country understands the issues that are at play, and that we had banditry in the first instance because historically we never provided security for our ungoverned space. looking at, it's there. But the places you see security historically are urban centers, township, cities. You know, if you go to your village, hardly would you see, even if you are going to see a one-room police station, it will be so decrepit that you imagine how they live there. So now and of course, we don't even secure our forest. So criminals saw opportunities there.
But that is changing.
That's what I'm saying. It's not easy. It's whatever we were doing before was to contain, you know. But this policy, the conceptualization that I'm seeing, is a principal target tool, you know, for that to address that problem.
Okay.
You now have people who understand the forest. Go take charge of the forest.
Now, briefly, how do you assess investor confidence?
I started with investors' confidence.
how would you say
that
is investor confidence?
It's increasing. One, you have a predictable foreign exchange. Two, you also have an attractive interest rates, you know, that can attract investors both domestically and globally into the economy.
Okay.
You know?
And we also see the outplay of ease of doing business.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, work in progress. But very briefly, we're out of time. What are your projections going forward? Beyond 2 years, we see the World Bank projection for the economy, 3.6% for 2025. If you want to look at all the projections here and there, are we on the right trajectory as we round up?
Yes, we are on the right trajectory. I protested. IMPI, Independent Media and Policy Initiative Group, issued a statement to reject both the IMF and the World Bank projections, believing that what they do is to adopt the rear mirror approach. Look at what has happened long time. But we are looking at what is happening, what would also happen. That's the windshield outlook. So for us, we believe that at least we would have up to 5% GDP growth in 2025.
With the uncertainty.
And I'm sticking. There's no,
with the uncertainty.
I am not seeing any form of
tariff.
No, I'm not.
Trump's tariff.
Trump tariffs had gone around the world, impacting different economies, but apparently it has not impacted the Nigerian economy. And I said that earlier, that we don't have each business doing with America.
I think we should put our minds to be optimistic and not be pessimistic in looking at the economy because it's a global crisis anywhere in the world.
I think we are growing a resilience, which is not part of the character of the Nigerian economy before. And that is what happened when you enable businesses and people. So the policies that are being deployed now are helping to enable businesses and people.
All right, we have to leave the conversation there.
All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ni Akinshiju. He's a financial and investment analyst and chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. Thank you for giving us insight into issues concerning the economy.
Pleasure, man. Thanks so much.
All right, Musa Abubakar, our business correspondent here in NTA. Thank you so much for your input.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, and we've been looking at the economic reforms of President Bola Tinubu's administration. For us, we'll continue to lend our voices and the advocacy on the policies of the federal government so that citizens can key into initiatives that benefit them. And that's Platform. I'm Ruth Aguilera.